when Hurricane Gilbert hit us in 1988, it wiped out 30% of our GDP. You always need to have some emergency supplies on hand. I say to the general public, plan your evacuation route well ahead of time. So, yes, a large part of Jamaica's debt situation was because of profligacy in our own public finance management. What you wouldn't want to happen in a disaster is for someone to be saying, this is not my role, it's your role. So the purpose of this gathering is, as you would have seen in its structure, that the leaders are able to share their plans, share their policies, share their concerns and challenges, and to share strategies to overcome them. Good morning, everyone. We meet here each year to review our plans to ensure that we are ready should we be hit by a natural disaster, particularly a natural disaster of a national scale. We often take it for granted that we are all in the same government, we should know each other. Sometimes that is not the case. Government of Jamaica, like any other government, is complex with many different functions held and executed by many different people with diverse outlooks, different motivations. But for the organization to work on a common challenge, such as a natural disaster, all its leaders, in particular, must be of a shared mind. But no one entity can respond wholly and solely to a natural disaster that is on a national scale. The entire government has to respond. Now, Jamaica, like many Caribbean countries, we are extremely vulnerable to natural disasters, and the human and economic costs are substantial. According to the International Monetary Fund, Jamaica's exposure to natural disasters rank in the top 20 globally. And this is primarily due to our low-lying coastal zones, which is where most of our population exists, and our 5 major fault lines. Now, Jamaica has withstood approximately 40 natural disasters of a national scale between 1950 and 2017. And that would be about 1 disaster per year. 60% of these were hurricanes and storms. And in fact, floods, droughts, and epidemics accounted for about 40% of our natural disaster profiles since our independence in 1962. One thing we can then be proud of is that we do have a very well-structured legislative framework to manage disasters. And in fact, our gathering here is as a result of the requirement in our legislation. So we are fulfilling the legislative framework to execute our response. So one, all of you here who are leaders will lead the disaster response. You know what your responsibility is. But more than that, everyone else knows what your responsibility is. But there is a word that has become very well used in our vocabulary these days, and that is called resilience. So the purpose of preparedness is to recover quickly. And the idea is not just to recover, but to recover quickly. And of course, we have added some things to it, recover stronger. Now, in addition to the conventional responses to natural disasters, making sure fire, police, military, your works entities, your Central Organization for Disaster Response, or ODPEM, all the other entities that are critical to a disaster response. In addition to that, what we have noticed, and particularly for resilience, is that the Ministry of Finance is actually a very critical entity in disaster response. Absolutely critical. There's a dimension to disaster response which is called financing. Disaster financing is critical. Now, disaster financing, it's not financing when a disaster hits. That's not what it is. And traditionally, what we have done is to believe we can self-insure, meaning that, well, if a disaster hits, then all we do is to reallocate from existing needs and spend on recovering from the disaster. But in countries like Jamaica that are constantly facing disasters, what happens? The disasters impact your GDP significantly, reduces your productivity, which reduces your fiscal wherewithal, the ability to finance public expenditure. And then you end up doing what? You end up borrowing. So we have taken, this administration, we have taken a different approach to disaster risk management, particularly on the financial side of things. And in fact, we have developed the National Natural Disaster Risk Financing Policy, which there was quite a significant process of consultation. I'm certain that almost everyone in here participated in some way in the development of that policy or contributed to that policy. For the first time, we have created buffers within our budget so that we are able to respond to natural disasters. Now, in line with our new policy of disaster risk financing, in 2021, Jamaica became the first country in the Caribbean, and certainly the first small island developing state, to issue or sponsor a catastrophe bond. The bond is effective up to, it is for 3 Atlantic tropical cyclone cycles, so that would end in December 2023. And in the event of an event that qualifies for payout, Jamaica would be protected up to US $185 million in rapid response in terms of financing. So we are not only building the fiscal buffer, we are also getting insurance basically in place. So I just thought I would bring this within our domain of understanding. So we appreciate the various dimensions of the government's policy for being able to respond to disaster and give confidence to the public regarding the continuity of business in Jamaica. Now, I say to the general public, in the event of a disaster, whether it be a hurricane or, God forbid, any other disaster, plan your evacuation route well ahead of time. If you live on the coast or in a low-lying area, you may have to evacuate in the event of a major storm or hurricane. While you will undoubtedly get instructions from ODPEM and the Met Office. They usually send out these warnings over public transmissions. You need to create your own evacuation plan well in advance of a disaster strike, so that you will know very quickly what is not just your route, but how you're going to utilize that route. So I'm therefore making the appeal for Jamaicans living in low-lying areas of our coastal zones. Make your evacuation plans early. A hurricane, while you may be given a day or two notice, when it actually happens, the surges can move very quickly. If there, God forbid, if there is an earthquake, you are on a low-lying area, tsunamis are a possibility, and they happen very quickly. So I'm urging all Jamaicans, as a part of our preparedness, bring your family together and say, all right, if this were to happen, which is the best route we should take? And where is the best place for shelter? So you want to know where would be the approved shelters of the government. You know that schools in the area are usually used as shelters. In today's economy, it's difficult sometimes for some households to buy more than they need, especially households who are on limited income or no income at all, and they live from day to day. But for those of you who can, and even for those of you who can't, it is absolutely important that you put aside even 2 or 3 days of food supplies. Make sure you have water, some amount of canned food, some amount of dried foods that can last without refrigeration. Put together a small emergency first aid kit. And I'm not saying that you must go out and buy an elaborate toolbox with all kinds of first aid and medical supplies. Make sure you have your basics. You have some Band-Aids, alcohol, Come, Minister, help me. Tell me all the things you would want. You put in your flashlight. Yes. Yes, if you have medication that you have to take, make sure that you have those supplies. So all of you know what to do. So why we don't do it? But I'm urging all Jamaicans to start to think in this way as we approach the hurricane season. Of course, you want to make sure that you can secure your critical documents. So Ziploc bags are very effective, a simple way of protecting them from water and other hazards. So you might want to start to look at how you can secure your critical documents. Now, not many people, insure their property. But again, in terms of our financial readiness, this is something that we ought to look at. So I'm encouraging Jamaicans to explore the options that are available for insurance financing for your property, and to ensure that if you do get insurance, that it is adequate. Because sometimes people take out insurance and they find that it is inadequate. So make sure that if you decide to do that, your insurance is adequate. And for those of you who have insurance, it is always a good idea to check now to make sure that what you originally contracted to is presently sufficient for recovery. Then I would say take steps to protect your home and valuable properties. So if you live very close to a storm drain or a gully, you want to make sure that your parish council is aware if the invert is undermined or if a tree is growing in the gully that could potentially block the flow, that could create flooding. You need to be proactive in this regard to make sure that any infrastructure, civil infrastructure that is close to your home that could create a problem for your home, that you are proactive in ensuring that those are addressed. In today's world, where we are very pro strategies for climate change, I am not encouraging the cutting of trees. However, if there is a tree that could pose a threat to your home, you should take steps to, as much as possible, ensure that you preserve the tree, but that the tree does not destroy your home. So you figure that one out. So it might mean you have to limit, but you know, you wouldn't take that decision lightly, right? And of course, if it is close to power lines, you would want to inform the utility company of the threat that the tree poses. If you are currently building, ensure that you are following the building codes. Our building codes are, I would say, one of the strongest in the region. Yes. Since Hurricane Gilbert, you know, everybody is using a slab roof instead of a zinc roof, and people, you know, our building culture is to overbuild. So we have invested heavily in concrete and steel. There's no question in my mind about that. But still, if you have timber roofs, ensure that you put on your hurricane straps. All right, just that simple action alone could save you significantly. But an important part of your building is to make sure that your structure assists in your sustainability. So yes, in a hurricane you have a deluge of water, but after the hurricane is over, you are likely not to have potable water. So you have to, in building, ensure that you have your building captures water and can store water. So my encouragement to all Jamaicans is to have your water sustainability strategy integrated into your housing strategy. And we are moving in that direction. We will be giving out several thousands of tanks to households that are assessed to be in need, and we will be building out a strategy for catchment, which would help to convert some of those tanks into rainwater harvesting strategies. So we're doing our part, and we encourage all Jamaicans to do their part. So with those encouragements, I bring my presentation to a close and to repeat that as leaders, you are absolutely important in our national response. The national response must be unified. The national response must be in keeping with our legislative framework. And you, as leaders, must be motivated enough, informed enough, and strategic enough to bring our national plan to fruition in terms of a response. Now, once we get the leadership level right, then the resource mobilization element of the response will be there in tandem to support you, as I have outlined, that through the Ministry of Finance, we have developed our disaster risk financing strategy. So we will have the leadership together, you will have the resources together, and in terms of the human resources, the leadership resource is critical to give direction and leadership. I've seen our mobilization at work, and it requires long hours Sometimes you have to be away from your home. In other words, in the disaster, you have to leave your family to man stations to ensure that other families are protected. That doesn't happen if within the organization there is dissonance. That when the leader of the organization picks up the phone to call the subordinate to say, listen, we need you here, and the subordinate just say, I never see that call. But if we are all of a mind share where we understand the importance of our role, you don't have to worry about that. So if the leader of the organization picked up the phone and didn't say good morning or good afternoon, it's not an issue. Because you realize that in this environment of emergency, those things don't matter now. Right? And so this is that process that we're trying to build here, that in the event of an emergency, our team works together in unity for the national good. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.